And welcome back for the next episode. We're going to take a little bit of a detour tonight. Because of the holidays, I don't have a lot of time to work on the tutorial. So we're going to do just a few simple things tonight and talk about some of the discussion that went on the forum. And then after the holidays, we'll come back for the next episode and start moving the rest of the red units into their positions. But for now, though, I want to go over some of the stuff that came up on the forum. So let's zoom in here closely. And if you remember, we set up a route here, I believe it's this one, yep, that allows 1/6 alpha, who we originally positioned here at waypoint 5, to retreat along this route back to waypoint 9 if he comes under direct fire. Now we did that with conditions. So if we want to just refresh our memory here, we can look at this. So we basically said, go ahead and embark on this route if you're 1/6 alpha and 1/6 alpha is under direct fire. So we gave it an explicit condition in order to take that route. What came up on the forum was that we don't necessarily have to do that, and it may actually have been a good idea. I'm going to leave it the way it is, but something for you to play around with perhaps. If this route had no conditions on it, so for example, we were to go back and just remove those two conditions, depending on the tactics that we applied here at waypoint 5, the unit would take this route automatically. And the two tactics that come into play there are defend and guard. So if we have 1/6 alpha set to defend tactics up here at waypoint 5, and this route were non-conditional, 1/6 alpha would embark on the first attached non-conditional route if moderate losses are sustained. So in this case, presumably as a two-vehicle section, if one vehicle was lost, the other vehicle would retreat to waypoint 9. Now that might actually be better than having both vehicles retreat, but as I said, I'm going to leave it the way it is now, and you can do that as an exercise if you're interested in seeing how that plays out. The other tactic available to us here at waypoint 5 is the guard tactic. And that one works very much the same way as what we've done explicitly. If a unit is on guard tactics and it comes under fire, then it will take the first attached non-conditional route. So in that case, it would behave very much like the one that we set up. All right, the other thing that came up was the use of the variables. And I had always been under the impression that the word new in the variable box meant that you actually had to go in there and pick, x1, x2. Actually, let's bring that up so we can see it. And we'll pretend we're going to put a condition on here, but we really aren't. So we'll clear it here in a minute. But down here, for example, if we check this, I always thought this was just a reminder that said make sure you click here and pick x1, x2, or whatever. But it's actually not the case. If it's left on the word new, every time this condition is evaluated, you will get a fresh number. So that's actually going to be useful, I think, in some cases where you don't necessarily want repeatable behaviors. Using the X variables is great for repeatable behaviors. So for example, if we had units going, say, on parallel roads, and when they got to the intersections, if we wanted to make sure that both units went left or both units went right, then we could use a specific X variable, say x1, and attach that as a condition at both of those intersections. So that if x1 was less than 50, they would go left, and if x1 was greater than 50, they would go right. So in those cases, the ability to synchronize their movements is where those X variables come in very handy. If you don't care about that, you just want them to go one way or the other randomly, you can just leave this set at new and then set your range between the two numbers that you want. So let's go ahead and actually just cancel this. All right, so those were the points that came up in the forum after the last episode, and I thought they were worth reiterating. All right, so what we're going to do now is just do a couple of simple things just to keep this episode short and sweet. All right, what we're going to do now is set up the briefing. So for example, if we go over to Blue Forces and we click over here on the control knob and select briefing, you'll notice that the blue briefing is completely blank. If we now toggle this to red, what you're going to find here is a template briefing. Now this is a kind of a cut down version of what the real guys do. And some people, when they create missions, will either give very exacting briefings or some will give very vague and general briefings. I tend to take a, sort of a middle of the road approach, as you'll see here in a minute. Now what I wanted to get at here with the briefing is that the editor that you have here is very simplistic. So I'm basically holding down the mouse button right now, and you'll notice that as I move the cursor around, I can't highlight anything. So all of the usual text editing functions that you're used to, even in a simple program like Notepad, aren't available in the briefing editor. So my recommendation to you is, if you're going to write briefings that are more than a few sentences, and you will almost certainly always want to do that, do it in Notepad and then use the import feature to bring it in, which is what we're going to do. So since no one's ever going to see this red briefing, we don't have to mess with it. We're only making a single player scenario, remember. So let's toggle back to the blue side. And if you go up to the File menu now, okay, you'll see there's a mission text option here, and we can say Import. And I'm going to use this one here called the double cross briefing. Now, you'll notice here, if we look in the drop down, that it really only looks in one place, and that's in the export folder, and that's in your Steel Beasts document folders. So you need to make sure that whatever text file you create in this export subdirectory, otherwise it can't find it. Okay, I don't think that allows us to do anything. Yeah, okay. So you'll see here I put a couple of them in here. Double cross is the one that we're going to use. And that's going to be actually the final name of our mission once we get done with it, something beyond the useless tutorial. So we'll highlight that and say open. And now you can see you have a nicely structured briefing. I kept the general format of the one that's on the red side, except I left out the execution section and simply said execution of these orders is at your discretion. So you can try to make this very realistic if you want. If you look at some of the missions that are in the download section on the website, some of them are very, very good. And then other ones are, drive around and blow stuff up. I kind of tend to something a little more middle of the road than that. I'd always like to say what the scoring is going to be, which we haven't talked about yet, but you can see here how we're going to work it out eventually. And then, what's the enemy situation, what's mine, and what's my mission. And that's pretty much all I ever put in. How you go is strictly up to you. Now that we have the briefing in, the other thing we should do is come over here to the switch panel and select Summary. And the summary is a little brief blurb that shows up in the description of the mission when you're looking through the mission selector. It's always nice to put a little something in here so that the player has some idea what the mission's about, and it's helpful for allowing them to choose a mission that they want to play. So I'm just going to keep this very simple, and I'm actually going to just type this in. So I'm just going to say something like, this is a classic single-player meeting engagement. All right, so that simple one-line statement should give the player everything he needs to know. Obviously, we could do more if we chose, and I'll leave that to you as an exercise. But that's really all we need. for the summary for this particular mission. All right, let's switch back to the terrain display here. All right, the next thing I wanted to talk about was allowing red to have a little indirect fire support. We're not going to give it to blue because the human player usually has the advantage of better intelligence, and the AI is not all that sophisticated. So we'll give him a little help by letting him be able to call some artillery. It'll also help keep the blue player honest so that if he's leaving his units just sitting around in a place where red can see them, then, about 3 minutes he can expect something to fall on his head. So that's a good, always good training to keep your units in motion and, keep them out of sight. And if you know you've been spotted or you suspect you've been spotted, then start moving. So what we're going to do is go up to the options menu here. We're going to do red support. Now I don't want this artillery fire to be overwhelming, but I want just enough to make it interesting for blue. So we'll go ahead and leave it at 6 tubes per battery, but we're just going to cut it down to 1 battery. And I'm kind of thinking of this as a poor man's substitute for a mortar company or a mortar platoon. And we'll go ahead and give them high explosive, smoke, and ICM rounds. That should be all they need. We're not going to mess with any of the priority stuff. We'll leave it set on all units and definitely allow the AI to call fire. All right, so that takes care for red. Let's go up and check blue just to make sure. And if we take a look at that, you can see he's at 6 and 3. We're going to go ahead and leave it there. Basically leave all these at the default because it's not going to matter because we're not going to give blue any rounds. So obviously without rounds to fire, the fact that he's got 6 tubes and 3 batteries isn't going to do him any good because he can't fire anything. So that should cover us, I think. And I think that's going to be it for this episode. Go ahead and save the scenario. And thanks very much for watching. I hope you all have a happy Thanksgiving, and hopefully we'll get the next episode out next week.